Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Better. Better. My man said, are you Tony Hawk? And Tony Hawk's like 50. Yeah, I'm not that old yet. So before I start telling you my story, I want to make sure you don't make the same mistake I made when I was your age.
Hey, do you need to leave?
We'll be all right. I want to make sure you guys don't make the same mistake I made when I was your age. One of the biggest mistakes I made in my life was starting in middle school. When we would have these speakers, I would come through the auditorium doors. Before I ever even came through the auditorium doors, I already made a decision. I'm not listening to this dude. I'm not going to listen to this girl. And the reason that I thought like that was because I didn't care. The only reason I was showing up was because I really didn't want to be with the teacher in the classroom. So really what it was doing was giving me an opportunity to come outside of the classroom and not be where I really didn't want to be. And the reason that ended up being one of the biggest mistakes in my life, because I wasn't actually listening to the speaker, was because in 39 years of me being alive, the most effective way that I have found that people can learn is through other people's life stories. Because see, when we listen to people's life stories, we get an opportunity to relate to either the emotions they felt or maybe some type of experience that they've gone through. And then we can listen to this individual about how they manage that experience, and it can help us in our lives. So I don't necessarily want you to care today. The only thing I'm asking you to do is just listen. Because I promise if you listen, you'll find one thing that I say that will help you at some point in your life. I don't know when that's going to be. 10 minutes from now or 10 years from now. In the fall 2001, I got a phone call from an editor of a magazine. The editor of this magazine says, Tony, next month when you check your mailbox, you're going to get a magazine and your picture's going to be on the cover of it. I remember being a senior at Clovis High School in the middle of California where I grew up thinking, I'm going to touch down on the cover of a magazine. This will be the coolest day of my life. I start checking the mailbox. Finally, the day comes where I check the mailbox, I get the magazine, my picture's on the cover of it, so I started taking it to school, showing all the kids that I was on the cover of this magazine. But if somebody would have sat me down and said, Tony, take a seat. We need to tell you some things about your life. And if I took a seat and they said, Tony, in 3 years, you're going to go from the cover of this magazine to inside somebody's house robbing them at gunpoint, I would have said, no way, not me. I'm sponsored by Fox Racing. I got a shoe deal with their watch shoes. I'm sponsored by Spy Sunglasses. How am I going to go from the cover of this magazine to inside somebody's house robbing them at gunpoint? They would have said, Tony, you're going to make one choice, and it's going to change the rest of your life. I'm not here to tell you guys not to use drugs. I don't travel the United States 250 days a year and sacrifice a normal life to tell kids not to use drugs. Every single student in here already knows that message. The other thing I'm going to do, even though you're young, younger than the high schoolers, I'm not going to come here and tell you what to do with your life. Because at 39 years old, I still don't want somebody telling me what I need to do with my life. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to tell you my life story. I'm going to tell you the way I thought about things, the things that I did, the consequences that came with some of my actions. But most importantly, I'm going to give you something I couldn't get when I was your age because we didn't know how to handle the psychology side of mental health when I was your age. See, when I was your age, we didn't talk about suicide. We didn't talk about anxiety. We didn't talk about depression. We didn't talk about self-harm. We didn't talk about these mental health aspects, and we didn't understand that it was directly connected to our behavior, to our psyche and the things that we've been through. What I'm going to do is try and help you understand how our mental health, through my life story, is connected to the things that we do and why we respond to situations the way we respond. When I was a young kid, I found out I was gifted in sports. It didn't matter what the sport was. Basketball, baseball, soccer, rollerblades, skateboards, BMX bikes, volleyball, tennis. My first dream was to go to the NBA. You're cool. It's all right. I'll let him move. I found out when I was a young kid I was gifted at all sports, but my first dream was to go to the NBA. I told my dad I was going to graduate from the University of Michigan. After I graduated from the University of Michigan, I told my dad I was going to get drafted to the NBA. By the time I got to 6th grade, the high school coaches were coming to watch me run point guard. The middle school coaches were coming to watch me run point guard. It was really clear by the time I got to 6th grade that the short white kid from the middle of California could play basketball. But when I got to your age, some things changed. See, when I got to your age, I started showing up to school and had these overwhelming thoughts and feelings that I needed to kill myself. But I didn't understand where it was coming from. The only thing I knew is that I showed up to school and I felt really uncomfortable. I tried to stop the uncomfort from happening, but the more I tried to stop it, I couldn't get it to go away. And because I couldn't get it to go away, I started to think that there was something wrong with me. Because when I came to school and I started looking at all the kids that are sitting in this room, I started thinking to myself, there's no way that anybody else in this room is thinking or feeling what I'm feeling. And if they knew what I was thinking or feeling, they would judge me or think that something was wrong with me like I already think. So I started to believe that I was the only one that was having this experience, so I kept it to myself. One of my struggles was I had social anxiety. So when I came to school, I wasn't exchanging my phone number with the girl to talk to her. I wasn't hanging out with the fellas in big groups. I was spending time by myself because my anxiety made it extremely difficult to connect with kids and people. When I started isolating away from people, doing the opposite of what we're all supposed to be doing as human beings, I started to experience depression. The depression stopped me from wanting to go to school. The depression stopped me from even wanting to go to basketball practice, even though my dream was to go to the NBA. And when the depression started, the self-hatred, this idea that I didn't like who I was and that I needed to kill myself to stop these things from happening, was the idea that I kept coming up with every single day. And I'm grateful that I didn't make that decision, because today I can love who I am, but I had to do some things before I could get to this place that I'm at. One of the things that I was struggling with when I was your age was before the basketball games would start, I would be sitting down in the seats next to all my teammates. But I would be looking to the end of the gym doors and having a conversation with myself about this experience I was having with my father. I would say, "Come on, Dad. Come on, Dad. You promised me. You told me you were getting off of work this time." See, what I didn't understand at your age was why when I sat down in these seats to play basketball, which was my dream, I got to watch all of my teammates' parents come through the doors to watch them play. Jason's mom and dad showed up every single day. Jeff's mom came to every single basketball game. Jose's mom and dad came to every single basketball game. All of my teammates were getting to watch their family or their mother or father, whoever was their hero, their family show up to watch them play basketball. And what I didn't understand at 12 years old was while I was experiencing this thing with my father where he wasn't showing up when he said he was, the story I created about why he wasn't showing up, hey, my man, come sit up here with me. Yeah. Come on. You can sit in the chair. It's more comfortable anyway. You can kick back and then you just don't have to worry about talking. Because when I see you moving around, it disrupts me. Yeah, bro, you. Come on. Just come sit up here. It's more comfortable.
I don't think it's funny.
Trust me, brother. I was sitting in it. It's more comfortable anyway.
Let's go.
No, you can stay. Just sit right here. Yeah, sit right here, bro. One thing I want everybody to understand. I travel 250 days a year. I only get to be home on Saturdays. So I can be with everyone here. And when people are moving around and talking and disrespecting my time while I'm here, I promise you, I don't need to be here. I could go home and sit by myself and have enough money in the bank to live for several years and not do anything, but I would rather be here. Because the outcomes in your lives, whether you know it or not, I truly care about that. So when I come here, the only thing I ask is for respect. Because I promise you, if we traded Mike's positions and this young man started telling his story, I'm going to listen. Because he's been through some things I haven't been through. and he's had to manage some things I may never know what it's like to try and manage. And I want to listen to what he's had to go through and try and support him and what he's been through. And also listen, because maybe, how old are you, bro? How old are you? 12? 13? 12 or 13. I guarantee you this young man can teach me something. So the only thing I'm asking for is respect. At 12 years old, I had no idea that my father not showing up and what I was telling myself about my father not showing up was more important than my father not showing up. The story we create about the experiences that are happening in our lives is more important than the experience itself, because what we tell ourselves about why what's happening is happening in our lives is the reason that we do what we do on a daily basis and respond in the ways that we respond when situations occur in our life. I also didn't understand at your age that while I was having this experience with my father and my struggles with my anxiety and my depression and mental health, I was also going through this process that every single individual in here right now is absolutely going through. You're creating a belief system about yourself. This belief system that you're creating about yourself is something that you come up with subconsciously based on the situations you're growing up in at home. That means what's happening at your house, how your parents communicate to you, or what you see on a daily basis, and then what you experience when you come to school. Some of us in here are watching mom and dad drink alcohol every day. Some of us in here don't even have mom and dad. They're living with their grandparents. Some of us in here right now, their parents are going through a divorce and they don't know why it's happening. Some of us in here are growing up in situations that are causing us to feel really uncomfortable because our young minds can't make sense about why what's happening is happening. And as we're going through some of these things, some of us in here are in situations like I was, where my father, my hero, wasn't showing up for me, and I started to create the belief system, the one of two belief systems about myself, who I am and what I can do in the world. I can't, I won't, and I'll never be able. Unfortunately, that wasn't true about myself. And it's not true for any of you young people in here. What's true for every single person in this room is you can, you will, and you are able. But what if you come to school and you're already struggling with what's going on at home, and the people that are next to you are the ones that are bullying you? The people that you go to class with are the ones that are making fun of the things that you don't want people to make fun of you for. You start to believe that these things about yourself mean you can't, you won't, and you'll never be able. And when you believe that about yourself, you show up in the world and do things that make people believe you can't, you won't, and you're able, so you can confirm to yourself that you can't, you won't, and you're not able. But that's not actually true. So if you believe I can, I will, and I'm able, you do things that mean you can, you will, and you're able. I didn't believe that I could, because my father wasn't showing up. One of the mistakes that I made at your age was I never talked to anybody. I never told anybody I had anxiety, because I didn't even know what it was. I never told anybody I was feeling depressed or wanted to kill myself. And because I didn't tell anybody, I kept it to myself and made the story up in my own mind when my dad wasn't showing up. So I said, if my dad doesn't care, why should I? Immediately, there was no teachers, maybe one, that liked me. I got kicked out of every class. I struggled in school because I didn't even believe in myself. And the reason I didn't believe in myself was because I allowed the situation with my father and the silence of me not talking about what was happening decide who I was and what my value was. I learned the most important thing that we can do as human beings is have a conversation. It doesn't matter how small you think it is or how big you think it is. We have to find trusted adults. We may not have that trusted adult at home. You may not be able to talk to your mom and dad. I can't talk to my mom and dad about anything that has to do with my emotions because they don't understand. So I've learned to find a trusted adult out in the world. And as an adult, I can get a therapist. You youngsters may not be able to get a therapist. Maybe there's one at school, or maybe it's your teacher or your coach who you start to talk to about these things that you're experiencing, and that coach or teacher or staff member at school, they can give you a perspective that leads you to believe, I can, I will, and I'm able. And then what we learn is oftentimes when we have a conversation, the anxiety goes away. Oftentimes when we have a conversation, the regret goes away, or the feeling of rejection goes away. I wasn't having conversations at your age. I kept it to myself, and I believed my dad didn't care.
Really, my dad was a workaholic. He worked 14-hour days so I could have my Jordan shoes. He worked 14-hour days so me and my brother had opportunities that my mom and him didn't get when they were younger. My dad was doing the best he could to provide for our household, though, because I never talked to my dad about it. I never got to hear my dad's side of the story on why he wasn't showing up. And once I said, if my dad doesn't care, I don't care. This girl that came up to me said she was looking for some weed. I said, yeah, I can get it for you. Got the weed from this guy I knew in my guitar class, sold it to the girl, she got caught with it. When she got caught with it, I got kicked out of 7th grade for selling this girl weed. Now, it became a blessing in disguise because my brother was racing BMX already at this time, and my dad says, why don't you start going out to the BMX track with your brother? So I started going out to the BMX track with my brother. My dad says, why don't you try racing? You got a bike home. If you like it, we'll get you a better bike. So I started racing at 12 years old. At 12 years old, I started racing. By 18, I was on the cover of the largest BMX racing magazine in the world. I was ranked #1 in the country in points. I was sponsored by Fox Racing, Airwalk Shoes, Spy Sunglasses. Had thousands of dollars worth of merchandise shown up to my doorstep every single day. And most people that knew me would have said, don't worry about Hop. He's going to go off race BMX and be super successful. But they had no idea. When I took my helmet off, I wanted to kill myself. When I took my helmet off, I was struggling with anxiety. My senior year, my depression was so bad I had Saturday school every single weekend. If I brought my English teacher in here right now, she would tell you if I asked her why I showed up late every single day or didn't show up, was just because I was a punk. She had no idea though. The first drug that I ever took to stop the anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts was sleep. I didn't make it to first period because as soon as I woke up, I tried to put myself back to sleep. So I didn't have to feel what it was like to be me. I wasn't coming to her class because I didn't want to experience what I experienced every day that nobody knew was going on. See, when I was a young kid, they said, stay away from kids who smoke weed and drink. It was simple. Stay away from kids who smoke weed and drink because they're bad kids that do bad things that can influence good kids to do bad things. But that's not even true. In 2017, I was about to give a keynote speech at a medical conference. They gave me a brochure with a bunch of statistics on it. One of the statistics stuck out to me. It said 68% of kids in this room who use nicotine products, drink alcohol, use other mind-altering substances, including marijuana, have been the victim of a very specific type of abuse. And the reason that that's important is because some of us are sitting next to individuals that have experienced things that they never should have experienced. And as a result, they're feeling these things that are extremely uncomfortable. And then they find a vape pen, they find some weed, or they find a bottle of alcohol in the house. And because they're not talking about the experience with a trusted adult, they're not adopting coping skills or behaviors that can help them manage this experience without trying to change the way that they feel. But they find the bottle, the vape pen, or the weed, and it stops the emotions that are making them extremely uncomfortable temporarily. And they believe that the answer to managing this experience isn't having a conversation or changing their behaviors and talking to somebody about how to work through it. It's just to use something that changes the way that they feel. The problem is, while I understand why you do it, what happens when we keep doing it is the opposite of what we're feeling when we start. And for those of us that are in that position, where we're already adopting these types of behaviors to cope with our emotions, I want you to know that you're not alone. I want you to know that while you might tell yourself I'm fine, your behavior says otherwise. And that if we don't find ourselves having the courage to get ourselves to a place to talk to somebody about it, we end up using more things, more people, and more places to try and cope with our experiences. And eventually, there's a consequence that comes with it that's far worse than what you're feeling right now. My encouragement to every individual in here that's experiencing something that's making them uncomfortable is to find a safe space to have that conversation. Start learning how to use positive coping skills that your safe space will teach you so you don't have to use substances to cope. At 18, I thought life was all about making money. I'm on the cover of this magazine. I don't even want to race BMX because the average BMXer makes $10,000 to $15,000 a year. You make more money flipping burgers at McDonald's than you do racing a BMX bike. and I thought life was all about making money, so I don't want to race a BMX bike. I want to make a lot of money and have a job so I can be rich, so I can drive a fancy car, have a nice house, have a good looking wife. I thought to myself, if I had these things, everything that I'm struggling with will just go away. But then I found out that if you have money and you have a nice house, it doesn't fix the things that people can't see. The things that you can achieve with your hands and touch don't change the things that people can't see. It's a commitment to a safe space and a conversation, and then making sure that you're engaging in activities with other people that love you and others and want to see everybody grow. Once you do that, then you start to feel and love who you are, which really is the key to going out and being in the world and being successful financially. At 18 years old, though, I think I'm just going to chase this job I get offered my senior year in high school. This guy in San Diego, California, where the beaches are in California. He was Entrepreneur of the Year in California at 23 years old, known for starting $1 million tech companies. He was inventing these 802.11b wireless internet radios. The part of the invention of what he was doing is what's led us to the wireless internet that we get to use every single day. He wanted somebody that could manage his internet network. And while I was isolating in my room because of my social anxiety, I was teaching myself how to build corporate computer networks. My aunt knew his wife, connected me to him, and he offered me $120,000 a year before I graduated high school. When I knew I was going to get this job, and I thought the job was all about making money, and life was that way, I put my gift away. My gift was racing my bicycle. My gift was the one of two things I want each and every one of you to consider adopting for yourselves. That is an activity that connects you with like-minded individuals. It's empowering for self and others. If it's empowering for self and others and it connects you with community, you will find that it helps your mental wellness. The second thing we need is a safe space to have a conversation. That's where we can tell our secrets, the things we don't want anybody to know to somebody and not feel judged by that person. If you have those two things, you'll find that your mental wellness and you can move through life comes so much more easily to you than if you don't have either one of those things. I had the gift of my bicycle connecting me with other individuals. But when I put that away, all I had was this. Myself. I can't. I won't. I'll never be able. I went down, before I graduated and went down to San Diego, I would go to these parties because I put my gift away. And I would see people smoke weed and drink. And I would tell myself, I don't need to smoke weed and I don't need to drink. Because I'm going to go down to San Diego and make 6 figures is what I told myself. But the more I went to parties, the more I wondered. The more I went to parties, the more I hated who I was. Because when the lights got turned on and people started drinking and the guys and girls started dancing, my social anxiety wouldn't let me do that. So I watched other people seemingly have fun. And I asked myself, why can't I have fun like everybody else? I want to have fun like everybody else. Then the day came when I told my friend Steve, I want to try smoking weed. He got all excited because I hadn't smoked weed before. I smoked weed for the first time. I couldn't stop laughing. I thought I was having a good time. But it didn't help my anxiety. It didn't help my depression. It didn't take away my suicidal thoughts. But I told myself, I don't want to smoke weed every single day like my friends do. Maybe I'll just smoke once a month. The next weekend comes by, I'm at a party, circled up, my friends circled up, they started smoking. They said, Hoff, do you want to smoke? I said, yeah, I'll smoke. But I told myself, I don't want to smoke weed every single day like my friends do. Maybe I'll just smoke on the weekends. Well, Wednesday comes by, I'm on the Xbox at my boy Tone's house. My friends started smoking, they said, Hoff, do you want to smoke? I said, yeah, I'll smoke. Next thing you know, I'm smoking weed every single day, just like my friends do. And what we didn't understand at 18 years old was this. Don't miss this. There's a doorway that exists, and you can't see the door because it's invisible. But when you walk through this door and you step all the way in, especially for drugs, nicotine products, alcohol at a young age, you don't get to just turn around and walk back out because you think you're done. That's not the way it works. I've been sober from everything, including cigarettes and nicotine products, alcohol, marijuana, drugs, for almost 16 years on May 17th. Hey, thank you. I really appreciate that. Not everybody claps for that, and I appreciate that because sometimes I get asked what my greatest accomplishment in my life. It's not the businesses I've started or the things I've earned, it's the sobriety that I have in my life because it allows everything else to happen. I've been sober for almost 16 years. I've only seen people walk through this door and get back out 2 different ways. One is the way 14 people I went to school with, 16 people that I know, went through the door and got back through the other side in caskets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. We would have smoked 1 whole row and 2 seats on the end of the second row. I went to school with them. The 16th one was my employee. I opened up a rehab center in California. He went to Mexico and slipped. He started using while he was there. His dad found him Christmas morning in the hotel room dead. The 15th story is the most important story in your entire life. Because each and every one of you are closely approaching the age where the most common death in the United States is from a fentanyl-related overdose. Frankie was found in April of 2020. His mom walked into his room and Frankie was sitting in his gaming chair, holding his Xbox remote. Had his headset on still. His friends were still on the screen playing Call of Duty. They had no idea that Frankie had been dead for hours. Frankie thought he took a pill called Xanax. A lot of the hip-hop stars talk about it. I would imagine most people in this room know what Xanax is. It's a drug prescribed by a doctor. Frankie, this pill that he took, looked just like the pharmaceutical pill, only it wasn't. It was made by somebody else with a drug called fentanyl. Frankie took a half of this pill. This drug called fentanyl is so powerful, Frankie didn't get to drop the remote. He didn't get to take his headset off. He didn't get out of the gaming chair. His mom was 30 feet away in the other room. He never even yelled for her. His friends on the other side of the screen didn't know that Frankie had died because fentanyl is so powerful that as soon as the drug hit him, it killed him instantly. Stopped his breathing. He couldn't say help. He couldn't tell his friends, I think something's wrong. And the reason that his story is so important is because, listen to this. When I was your age, you had to go into the door. You went all the way into this door using substances with the belief that addiction was a choice, which meant that can't happen to me. What happened to Tony could never happen to me because I would never let it happen. So you went into the door with the belief that I did, and then you found out when you went in that addiction's not a choice. You don't get to choose whether you're going to be me or not. Scientifically, we now understand that my brain and many other people like me, our brain is built differently. So when we go into the door, the substances take control of our thinking and our brain, and we can't stop it from occurring. This idea that we have to have the substances. And when the addiction starts, there's a consequence. But nowadays, in your generation, you don't even have to go into the door. Just go near it. Be around individuals or be the individual making choices that are using substances to change the way that you feel, and you 100% are putting yourself near the doorway where a substance could be laced with fentanyl and you overdose and die. And you might think that would never happen to somebody my age. In 13 years of being a speaker, I never had schools contact me and tell me their students were dying on campus. Last year, I had 15. And several of them, middle schoolers. In Maryland, at the richest part of Maryland, they had to give Narcan to a 12-year-old student. Overdosing on fentanyl on campus. In Oregon, they had 2 seniors on life support. The richest school in Montgomery County of Maryland, they lost a senior several months ago. All over the United States, kids are dying from fentanyl-related overdoses because the stuff they think they're taking isn't what it actually is. And the drug is so powerful, there's only one thing that can reverse the overdose, and if nobody's around to administer it to you, you die. And it's not about scaring you guys. It's about telling you, you know what, and now more than ever, we have to think about why we're doing what we're doing. And we have to ask ourselves, is what I'm doing actually working? And is what I'm about to do actually worth risking my life? because Frankie's not here and doesn't get another chance. He wasn't even inside the door. He was just around it. But I was just smoking weed when I was 18. That's not that big of a deal is what I told myself. Kids tell me that all the time in my DMs. It's not that big of a deal. I get it. That's how I thought. I went down to San Diego to take the computer job. It didn't work out. I came back home to Fresno, oldest little city I grew up in, and I kept going to parties. Then my friend told me he wanted to try this pill called Oxycontin. It was prescribed by a doctor. And I thought to myself, well, it comes out in an orange bottle prescribed by a doctor. It can't be unsafe, not realizing that sometimes the stuff that comes out of the orange bottle is no different than the stuff that comes from the cartel. It's just packaged different. Because it was packaged different, I thought it was safe. But something different happened when I tried Oxycontin. When I tried Oxycontin, instantly, my anxiety went away, my depression went away, my suicidal thoughts stopped. I could go to parties and have a good time. And I thought to myself, I'm fixed. You mean to tell me all I have to do is take a half of this green pill? And it fixes everything I hated about myself starting when I was your age? I thought to myself, why don't the doctors give me this? I was thinking this feeling that I was experiencing on the other side of the doorway was healing. I thought that feeling that was on the other side of the doorway that promised me everything was going to be okay, that took away the pain that I was feeling, was the truth. But then I found out over time, this isn't real. This doesn't work. It makes you believe it does, so you do it again, and then you do it again, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work like it used to. So you do it more. And then when you don't get it, you feel so uncomfortable, it's almost worse than when you first went through the door. And that is the dynamic behind how addiction works. See, I started taking these pills just to fix myself. I never was going to rob anybody. I was never going to become homeless. I never wanted to go to prison. I just wanted to use these things to help me manage my experience I was having in that time, not realizing that that's not how you get through the experiences that are extremely uncomfortable. So I started using these pills and then found out that these pills, these opioid pills prescribed by a doctor, painkillers, was no different than heroin. It was no different than fentanyl. So when I stopped using them, when I couldn't get them, I would get this flu. It was the worst flu I'd ever had times 100. They call it withdrawals. When I would withdraw, I would shake and convulse. I would vomit. Had diarrhea. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep and my mind would go crazy. It would go crazy because I knew that if I could just get this drug, I was fine again. And the way that works is when you become willing to do things that you would never do before. So one day, I woke up with some kids I went to high school with, because when I came home from San Diego, California, my parents kicked me out of the house. I was selling weed to my friends to try to get these pills to fix myself. My parents kicked me out of the house. I was living with some kids I went to high school with. We couldn't get the pills, so we had this flu, these withdrawals. I told my co-defendant, let's go rob this person. He said, are you serious? I said, bro, we know there's pills in the house. Let's go get them. He said, all right. So we drove and got guns. We went to this neighborhood. We get out of the car. In California, you got 6-foot fences that separate all the houses. We walked up to this house, opened up the backyard fence, went into the backyard. To the right of us was a door. I checked to see if the door was open. It was, so we walked in. We're standing in the garage. I turn around, look at my co-defendant. He's shaking. I said, what's wrong? He said, I'm nervous. I said, don't say nothing. Count to 3 and follow my lead. So we counted to 3. 1, 2, 3. I grabbed this door, opened up this door, we stepped into the house, we were in the kitchen. I remember seeing a lady sitting at the kitchen table. I put the gun in her face and told her, get up right now. I want all the Oxycontin inside this house right now, get up. This lady gets up from the kitchen table. She makes it right down the hallway. I remember walking down the hallway, seeing the family pictures on both sides of the wall. We get to the end of the hallway and we make a left. When we make a left, I remember looking in the back of this room and seeing a deadbolt locked closet. I knew inside the deadbolt locked closet were the prescription pills that we needed to get us back here because we were robbing one of our best friend's moms. She had multiple sclerosis and was getting prescribed these pills for her pain. What my friend didn't know was that these pills that came out of that bottle were no different than the drug called heroin or fentanyl on the street. And that when he started stealing them from his mom and selling them to us like kids do all over the United States, that many of us were about to find out that just because you think you can't struggle with addiction or that would never happen to you is not the way it works. So when we started using these to get ourselves to here, and then it became an addiction, we could no longer control our behavior, and the physical withdrawal when you couldn't get this pill was so painful, that flu, that you would become willing to do whatever it takes. There are students in here right now that are going through a very similar process on their own. They're just not putting a gun in their hand. There are students in here that are vaping already, which means you can't buy it. You're not old enough. So what do? I already know. You have a plug. That plug could be your older brother or sister. That plug could be your best friend's older brother or sister. That plug could also be your mother, father, somebody else's mother or father. But what happens when your plug can't get it for you and you don't have the money to just go in and you're not old enough to just go in and buy it? I already know. You go into your mom or dad's room because you know where their pen's at. And you take something out of their pen. Or you go into your brother or sister's room because you know they have money or they might have a pen, and you take that. Or you go through your mother or your father's wallets or purses looking for a little extra cash because your best friend's brother is the one that gets you what you need. And while you're doing it, you know you shouldn't, but the emotions behind you not being able to get what your brain now believes it needs has made you do something you normally wouldn't do to get something your brain has tricked you into believing that you need. And that, my friends, is exactly what was happening with me, but the substance I was using was so powerful, it would put you in a position where you'd be willing to put a gun in your hand and go into your friend's house and rob their mother. The worst decision I made in my life was going inside that home. The worst. I walked out of that room after putting the pills inside a pillowcase. I remember hanging them right down the hallway, seeing the family pictures again on both sides of the wall. I cut across the kitchen, went into the garage. I went outside. I opened up the backyard fence, started walking down the driveway, see my car pull up. When I see my car pull up, I remember thinking to myself, this is the perfect robbery. There's no way I'm getting caught. I was in and out of this house in under 2 minutes. But I know this. When I opened up the passenger side door of my car and I sat in the passenger seat, I was overwhelmed with shame and guilt. And this voice that said, you made the biggest mistake in your entire life, you're going to pay for this one. That voice and those feelings were so powerful, I told myself I would never rob somebody ever again. But my co-defendants, one who's dead now, from a drug overdose, they couldn't say the same thing. They kept robbing people. They kept robbing people and ended up on the news when they got caught. When they ended up on the news when they got caught, the lady we robbed saw my co-defendant on TV and said, that guy's in my house. He was in my house. Started an investigation on all my friends. 6 months later, the cops found out where I was staying. They raided the place, and they took me to jail for armed robbery. At 21 years old, I'm in Fresno County Jail for armed robbery. I called my parents. I haven't seen them in 3 years, or talked to them once in 3 years. I said, Dad, I'm in jail for armed robbery. Can you help me? My dad says, I'm not helping you. What do you want me to do? This is your problem. You deal with it. I said, Dad, I don't want to go to prison. Can you please help me get an attorney? My dad says, I don't know who to get. I said, look up this guy named Michael Idiard. These drug dealers that I run with use this guy, and they're not going to prison when they get in trouble. So my dad called. The next day I called my dad, and he said, son, this guy wants $30,000 to walk into a courtroom one time. We don't have that kind of money. But my dad said, your mother and I had a conversation. We're going to pull the money out of my retirement account. We're going to get you this guy, Michael Idiard. Hopefully he can keep you out of prison. You can get your life back, and I can get my son back. At that time, I had no idea that I was about to go into court for some privileges that I didn't ask for. I didn't have any control over. But I know this. I went to court with this, and one of the best defense attorneys in the state of California, and came from, quote unquote, the rich side of town. So they looked at me completely different. that my black friend that I had made friends with back at the cell, he was 18. He was a D1 football scholarship offer at 18 years old. He was picked up after football practice by two kids from his neighborhood, two men, 25 and 27 years old. What Tudebug didn't know was, when he got picked up outside his school after football practice, the two elders that were in the back of that vehicle had been kidnapped. And that those two men that picked him up were in the middle of a robbery. And they were going to take those two elders back to their house and rob them inside their home. The judge told Tuda, an 18-year-old boy, I would say, when you're in comparison to a 25 and 27-year-old that are armed with weapons in a vehicle, that because he did not get out of the car, he did nothing, didn't touch them, didn't go in their house, nothing. He stayed in the car with his football gear. The judge told him he had to go away for 17 years. The reason I tell you this story is because I went to school with like 10 black folks. There's so many colors in here, it's amazing. It's not the way it looked in my high school. And the 10 black folks that I went to school with, we didn't talk about it. We didn't say, what is it like? They didn't say, this is what it's like. We didn't listen. I had to find this out when I went to jail, that my scam and my parents' money would have individuals look at me completely different than somebody that came from West Fresno. And the reason I tell you this story is because I want your generation to continue to have the conversation that says every school should have money to make sure that you get a proper education. Every community should have infrastructure that takes care of people. You can have clean drinking water. Every person, regardless of the color of their skin, if they go to court, should be treated as a human being, not as somebody different because of the color of their skin. That conversation needs to be continued by your generation. I found out through my own experiences that certain things were completely unfair, and I didn't even have control over it, and neither does anybody else. In the regards of we don't get to choose our home, we don't get to choose mom and dad or the color of the skin we come out of our wombs with. I told my dad, this is crazy. They just gave Tudebug 17 years. You know what they gave me? 5 years felony probation, 1 strike on my record, and 90 days in a treatment center. I was in jail for 5.5 months while I was going through my case. My dad said, son, if you recognize that this isn't fair, then you need to make sure when you get out of here, you not only do something for yourself and others, but you got to do something for Tuda. And that's why I talk about it. I thought that the 10 years they told me I was going to get if I came back to jail would be enough for me to stop using it. They said, Mr. Hoffman, if you come back in our courtroom for anything, I'm going to give you all 10 years that I'm supposed to be giving you right now. Do you understand me? I said, yes, sir. Thinking that those 10 years would be a reason for me to run out the door and never go back in. But I didn't understand what was causing me to go back through the door was the emotional stuff that I had to work on. And that I was going to have to change these 6 things. The way that I think, the way that I talk, the way that I walk, the places that I go, the friends that I have, and the things that I do. And if I didn't change those 6 things, I would stay on the other side of the door regardless of what consequences I was facing. So when I got out of jail, I went to rehab for 90 days like they sentenced me to. And then when I got out of that, after 30 days, I was at a party drinking alcohol, thinking that I don't have a drinking problem, I got a drug problem. Well, I got in a fight that night because my friend got knocked out by somebody else in a fight. So I helped my friend. Well, I knocked this guy's tooth out in a fight, and 2 weeks later, I almost had to have my hand cut off in surgery. I couldn't clench a fist, I couldn't bend my elbow, I couldn't rotate my arm, I didn't know what was happening. So I drove to the hospital in the middle of the night. The nurse sees me and says, oh my God, you should have been in surgery days ago. I said, why? She goes, look at your arm. It's biology right up to your biceps. She goes, you have an infection in your knuckle that shuts your whole arm down. It's up to your bicep. This infection is going to get to your heart and kill you. We got to call a surgeon in right now. She said, we might have to cut your hand off tonight. So I go in, they give me painkillers for the pain. They cut the infection out of my hand, it's still here. They send me home with my parents at 21 years old with a Vicodin prescription. Vicodin is like Oxycontin. It's a painkiller prescribed by the doctors. An opioid, just like fentanyl and heroin. But it's a regulated dose when it's prescribed by a doctor and picked up at a pharmacy. But what my mom thought is that drug addiction is a choice. So my mom thinks that the bottle says 1 pill every 4 hours. My son is a knucklehead who just wants to take 4 at once. What she didn't understand is that opioids, for me, were the only thing that could do that. Not cigarettes, not alcohol, no other substance but opioids could do that for me. So when they gave it to me at the hospital, immediately my brain started its thing where it wouldn't stop thinking about these opioids, the pills that were in that pill bottle, telling me I have to go get them. So I said, wait for my mom to leave the keys out. When she leaves them out, steal them, get them, and leave. 3 days later, that's exactly what happened. My mom left the keys out by accident. I stole them, went in the closet, got the pills, and I left. Over the next 2.5 years, my life would completely unravel. When I started putting needles in my arm and using drugs that way, my friends that I went to school with no longer wanted to hang out with me for obvious reasons. But I had one friend, my best friend Nate. He always gave me a place to stay and food to eat. I remember I called him one night. I said, hey bro, I need a place to stay. Can I come by? He said, yeah, come by. I get to his house and I knock on the door. His dad answers. He says, mijo, you can't stay here anymore. I said, what do you mean, Alex? He said, mijo, somebody called me and told me you're stealing credit cards. You need to get your life together. I said, Alex, I'm not stealing credit cards. I really wasn't. I said, can I talk to Nate? He said, yeah, Nate's in his room. So I walked into Nate's room and I said, hey bro, I need a sleeping bag. He said, why, Hoff? I said, bro, I'm sleeping on the street tonight. He said, Hoff, call somebody. Get your phone out and call somebody. I said, bro, I've been calling people all night, man. I got a prepaid phone. I'm running out of minutes. Please, just give me a sleeping bag. He said, fine, Hoff. I'm about to go sleep at Clovis High School. The high school I graduated from in 2002. In the baseball stadium under the announcer's tower. Because it was raining and I needed a place to stay dry. I remember I walked out of his house, I had the sleeping bag. I'm walking down the driveway, I hang left towards the high school. He lived 150 yards from the tennis courts. I get below the street light outside his house and I hear his voice. He says, Hoff. I turned and I looked at him, I said, yeah. He said, look at yourself, bro. What are you doing? I said, don't worry about it, Nate, I got it. That's what we all said. We thought that we could just turn around and walk out the door because we wanted to. Nate's been dead for 15 years in March. My best friend growing up. Family vacations together. There was not a weekend that went by that we didn't stay at one of each other's houses. We played sports together. And we also came into these auditoriums and we rushed to the back. The further away that we could get from the speaker, that's where we sat. As soon as we had an opportunity to not listen, that's what we did. We didn't think that things like this could happen to us. I wrote this guy every day for 12 months when I was in prison. Every day. With one goal in mind, to inspire Nate to see that you could get out of this door, and that I was doing it for myself, and I wanted him to do it for himself as well. After 12 months, I get a letter from Nate. He says, Hoff, you've been inspiring me with your letters. I'm going to change my life just like you. So I check into rehab. But I got to wait 2 weeks for a bed space to open up. In the time I got the letter, and the time he was told he needed to wait 2 weeks before he could get into rehab and change his life, his dad walked into his room and he found him dead on the floor. I used to be so jealous of Nate's dad. I didn't get to hear my dad say I love you until I was 24 years old in prison. Nate's dad walked into his room every single morning and he kissed him on the forehead and he'd say, I love you, Mijo, I'll see you when I get home from work. But 15 years ago, he went into the room to do what he did every single morning. And there was another Nate. He was done. He died from a drug overdose. It's something I don't want to happen to anybody in here with the person that's sitting next to you. If you're sitting next to you, your version of Nate, whoever that is. Could be your best friend. Life's already hard enough. And when we lose people that are close to us, this thing called grief, it's extremely difficult to work through. We have so many things that we deal with grief. For the next 6 months, I slept on the street, behind dumpsters so people couldn't find me, in dirt fields so people couldn't find me. If I was lucky, I got a Motel 6. If I was luckier, I got somebody's couch or somebody's floor to sleep on. But if I got a couch or a floor, it was only because I had money and drugs on me to share with the people in the house at that time. The people I was around at this point, nobody cared about me, my well-being, or even who I was or where I came from, nothing. Nobody cared. The only thing they cared about was, do you have money or drugs to share with us? I never felt so misunderstood. People would spit on me outside of corner stores if I asked for some change so I could buy something to drink or eat. Kids, I remember one time I was walking by a middle school, and the kids on the bus started throwing stuff out the windows at me. I never felt so alone, so hopeless. I didn't think that my life was going to change for the better in this moment. But I never stopped giving up. And on January 21st, 2007, I had a spiritual experience that changed my life. It's the only reason I'm alive and doing what I'm doing today. That night, I broke into a house that was up for rent. January 22nd, I wake up at 2 p.m. There's 4 cops in the house with their guns drawn on me. They arrest me and violate my probation for armed robbery. 30 days later, I get sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. When I get to Wasco State Prison, I'm on D yard, cell 254, I got the top bunk. I walk into the cell block at about 10:30 at night. I go up the staircase and across the tier, open up cell 254, slide it closed, and I meet this guy Dizzy, that's my cellmate. I start making my bed, and after I make my bed, I jump up on my bunk and I start laying down. At 11 p.m., they flip the lights off. Before 11 p.m. hit, I was reading this quote in the ceiling and somebody written in it with a pencil. It said, "Be careful what you think, because your thoughts become your words. Be careful what you say, because your words become your actions. Be careful what you do, because your actions become your habits. Be careful what you make a habit, because your habits become your character. And your character becomes your destiny." I kept reading it over and over and over. It made so much sense to me. And I thought to myself, if this is the blueprint of how I ended up in prison, then I can use this quote to completely re-engineer my life and change the results that I'm getting. So I told myself, when I get out of here, I'm going to do 4 things. When I get out of here, I'm going to raise BMX professionally. When I get out of here, I'm going to the Olympics. When I get out of here, I'm going to start a nonprofit organization called the Free Roll Project that uses action sports for kids in Southeast Fresno. And when I get out of here, I'm going to become a professional speaker. But I didn't know how I was going to go from a prison cell to the Olympics, because at that time, nobody had ever started in a prison cell and made it to the Olympics. But I read in this really big book, if you can be trusted with little, you can be trusted with much. And so I started thinking to myself, what does that mean? What it meant for me was at 23 years old, I couldn't brush my teeth every single day. If I can't brush my teeth every single day, how would I ever make it to a place like the Olympics? So then I learned all the really small things that we think don't matter in our lives, that we can overlook, actually are the reason we go where we're going, whether we know it or not. So I started taking brushing my teeth as serious as I would going to the Olympics, and realized that me changing my life started with something very small, like brushing my teeth. So when I brushed my teeth, I said, I'm going to the Olympics. Then I started making my bed every single day and told myself, I'm going to the Olympics. Then I learned how to organize my stuff and told myself, I'm going to the Olympics. Then I started learning how to become disciplined. The ability to do good work when I didn't want to do good work at all. By a show of hands, youngsters, how many of you have ever woken up and thought to yourself, I don't want to go to school today? Raise your hand if you've ever thought that. Go ahead, raise it. Yeah. Hey, if you're like me, raise both your hands. Because you probably really don't want to come to school, right? I get it. Yeah, I see you. Right? If we had 3 hands or 3 arms, we'd have all 3 of them. Shh. Now watch this. Staff, if you have ever woke up and thought to yourself, I don't want to go to work today, raise your hand. Okay. We got some labor room, I get it. Some of our staff need to raise both your hands. Okay. I'm going to tell you why I do that. I do that because I want each and every one of you young individuals to recognize that we are all more alike than we are different. Even if these people around the room look really old and you think that they all do the right thing in every single moment of their life, they themselves wake up and have things that they don't want to do that need to be done. What makes us successful adults and successful humans is our ability to do good work when we don't want to do good work at all. By a show of hands, how many of you, when the ice cube falls out of the fridge and hits the ground, instead of picking it up and putting it in the sink, you just kick it under the fridge? Raise your hands. Okay. I love it. Okay. Shh. What do you think my mind thinks when the ice cube falls out of the fridge and hits the floor? Kick it under the fridge! Because I'm just like you. But guess what? Watch this. Shh. Every time the ice cube ever falls out of the fridge, or I try to be Steph Curry with my Q-tips and throw it into the trash can, and it doesn't make it because I'm not Steph Curry and it's not a basketball, my mind thinks, leave it there. What I have learned to do is experience the thought or idea to not do something I need to do, but do it anyway. Because when I use discipline as a muscle that I train, when other parts of my life, my mind wants me to take shortcuts, I don't take the shortcut because I start treating everything like the ice cube. Everything in my life is an ice cube. There is nothing that comes in my life that challenges me, makes me feel uncomfortable, in which I don't see it happening as the ice cube falling out of the fridge. All I have to do is pick that ice cube up and put it in the sink. And if I do that over time, I will find myself in a position where more things good are happening in my life than bad. Your ability to do good work when you don't want to do good work at all will oftentimes determine the destination that you find yourself in. I promise you, if you adopt the ice cube analogy into your life, what you can accomplish and the amount of people you can help is infinite. I left prison after 2 years a completely different person. It's all it took, 2 years. Seems like a long time, but for 2 years I was working on changing my perspective, my attitude, my behaviors, and when I got out, I was completely different. I raced my first professional BMX race I'd ever raced in my life 5 months after I got out of prison. I took 3rd place. That first year, I won 5 races at the lower pro division. 1 year after getting back on my bicycle, I started telling my story. The second year of racing my bicycle, I got invited to the Olympic Training Center in Chula Vista, California by the United States of America. That same year, I made 6 finals at the highest level of racing BMX. But in October of 2011, I was in Orlando, Florida. Me and this guy, David Herman, who was the top athlete for the London Games, for the London Olympic Games for the BMX team, we were racing neck and neck in Orlando, Florida. He makes a mistake over a jump at 30 miles an hour and he bumps into me. I put my leg out and instantly snapped my ACL, almost shattered my shin, obliterated both of these things in my knee called meniscuses, and my racing career was instantly over. Young people, I want you to understand this. Sometimes life has a different direction for us than the one we have for ourselves. I was so devastated because I felt like I was supposed to be at the Olympics when I was in that prison cell, and that if I did everything that I was supposed to do, I would get there. But when I blew my knee out, I felt completely different. I felt like, why does this always happen to me? This is why I don't try to do the right thing and change my life, because something like this always happens. But for the last 3 years, I had been picking up that ice cube and putting it in the sink, which was helping me change the way I believed things about myself. I no longer believed I can't, I won't, and I'll never be able. I believe I can, I will, and I am able. Which means I have to do what I believe. So I kept brushing my teeth and making my bed and organizing my stuff. I believed there was something good that would come out of me losing my racing career. 6 months later, after my knee surgery, I started my nonprofit. We raised $2,500 our first year. 6 months after my knee surgery, I started coaching BMX athletes. By 2016, I'd become one of the biggest speakers on mental health and substance use in the country. By 2020, my story went viral and I became one of the biggest motivational speakers in the world. By 2016, my nonprofit was raising over $120,000 a year, giving away $40,000 worth of bicycles, $10,000 worth of skateboards. By 2016, I coached 2 world champions, 3 national champions, had 25 athletes from Australia to Bolivia. In July of 2016, my top female athlete, Brooke Crane, she calls me. She says, pack your bags, Hoff. We're going to the Olympics. In 2016, I became the first person who started in a prison cell and participated in the Olympics. I just thought I was supposed to get there as an athlete. I never gave up. I stayed disciplined. I picked up those ice cubes and I found a way to get there if I couldn't get there as an athlete. I tell people the best thing about being at the Olympics wasn't the Olympics itself. Buying a house is the Olympics for somebody. Renting your first apartment is the Olympics for somebody. A relationship with a person you never thought would love you that loves you is the Olympics for somebody. Every one of us have an Olympics in our life. The best thing about the Olympics for me that was the physical Olympics was how I got there. When I looked in the mirror, I no longer hated who I saw. I helped people that were in need. I saw that life isn't always about myself. I had anxiety that didn't need to use drugs over. I had depression and didn't need to use drugs over. People didn't like me. I didn't have to use drugs over to feel like I could never be wanted by somebody in this world. The stories we create about our experiences, that is, what's happening in your life to you or around you, the story you create about that is more important than what's happening to you or around you. Because the story you create about it is why you're doing what you do and respond the way that you respond. So be careful. Thank you. Thank you. So before we leave, I know you guys can't wait to get back to class. Oh, well then y'all better do really good at this. So before we go, this is my favorite part. Hopefully it'll be one of your favorite parts as well. I'd like to take some questions from you. I want to say this. I make myself accessible on Instagram 10 years from now, 10 minutes from now, and I answer every DM from students all over the United States to come into my inbox. But I understand that you may want to do that because you don't want to ask a question in front of your peers. So I make myself accessible for that. But you have to understand sometimes it takes me several weeks to get back to you because a lot of kids are messaging me. What I would like to see you do is have the courage to raise your hand and ask your question, whatever it is, because many other students in here have that same question. And if I get the answer for you, I'm also answering it for other students. So if you have a question, the first question, raise your hand, and I'll be happy to call on you. My life's an open book.